All right. Good morning, everybody. Today and really throughout this week, we're going to be doing something I think you'll be familiar with. We're going to be writing DBQ and kind of doing the requisite research that goes along with that beforehand. So we're answering the question that I kind of posed to you at the very beginning of this unit a couple of weeks ago. So we're talking about how revolutionary was the American Revolution, or kind of in more simple terms, how much did things change as a result? You've heard me kind of toss around those words radical and conservative. That's what I'm asking. If this revolution was radical, it means it changed things a lot from a political, social, and economic standpoint. If it's conservative, we're saying that not much actually really changed other than, a new government. But other than that, people's day-to-day lives kind of stayed the same. That's the question that we're answering. We've looked at this a little bit already. When we look at Enlightenment philosophers, and obviously we've seen that their ideas are being put into action in some ways in the new government. You can see like those are kind of radical ideas. Those things signify big changes in thought. But then we've also seen examples of how actions by the people who we would call the Sons of Liberty or the Patriots maybe weren't entirely for changes in. Maybe they didn't want to change the whole structure. Maybe they just kind of wanted to stay in power. So that's what we're trying to figure out here. And I'm going to kind of give you the tools, hopefully, to figure that out. Obviously, we're not going to look at every single piece of history. We're going to look at 10 different documents and then kind of go from there. So it won't be the entire picture, but it'll be kind of a neat little example in seeing if we can answer this question. So first thing you're going to do is read through this background essay. It's going to talk about it's going to kind of set you up. It's going to give you some context, tell you what's going on to an extent. And I'll just show you some of these terms that it's going to talk about. Radical and conservative. I've talked about those before. We're talking about radical. Essentially, we're talking about change. So if you're calling a person radical, typically that means that you're saying that they favor drastic political, economic, or social reforms. Luckily for us, these are the three things that we're going to look at. And I'll get to them in a second. Conservative is the other term. It really just means that you don't want to change. You hold on to tradition. You're not looking to go and mix things up necessarily. So as you read through this, you'll see references to social change, economic change, and political change. I think we know what those terms mean, but just in case, I put these definitions down here. If we're talking about actually, I left off political because I think we have a hold on what that one means. But if we're talking about social, we're talking about like there's a change in people's daily lives. There's a change in how people interact with each other. So you're going to look for evidence of that as you read. If a change is economic, we're talking about wealth, money. Is who has the wealth? Is that changing? Is it the same old rich people that have the money and the poor people are so poor? Or is there a real change in how these resources are spread out in the society? And then lastly, the political part, which I didn't put in as a definition, is there a real change in how the government works? Or is the government kind of still working for the same people that it worked for before? Because they're making some pretty bold claims, especially about politics. So we'll see if that actually changes. So read this to kind of get some context. You'll see that people don't all have the same point of view. And it also kind of brings up the thought that maybe, just because the revolution happens and then 100 years later change happens doesn't necessarily mean that there's causation there. But your job today is to read this, and then I want you to go today kind of skim over these documents and try to put them in one place or the other. So you can come here and see you've got this kind of prep sheet that we're going to do together. And you're just going to put, like if you think it's radical, put document 1 on the radical side. If you think it's conservative, put doc 1 on the conservative side. So just kind of making a quick decision about each one. Where do you think they line up? You can change this at any point if you end up changing your mind. Over the next couple of days, we'll look at these documents individually in kind of more detail. I've got here exactly what you need to be doing for each one. So One, you're going to tell me who or what is the source, so who's writing it or what is it about. Like just who the person is essentially that's writing it. Two, you're going to tell me the date of the source. The date of the source should help you determine if it is a primary or secondary source. If you need to know what that is, I think we know, but just in case, if it's a primary source, that's a document or an object which was created during the time that we are studying. So if your source is from 1777, it's probably a primary source. It's written by people who are living through those events. If your source comes later and doesn't seem to necessarily, maybe it's someone writing about the revolution, or something like that. It could be a secondary source. It's something written or created, after the time, who's not involved. Now, some of these you're going to have to make kind of some judgment calls, because there might be something that's written after the Revolutionary War, but the person is still, living through the time and they're still dealing with the consequences. You might have to kind of make an educated guess on some of those things. But I think more or less these should be easy to determine, and we'll be going over it, and I think we can make sure that we can figure out which one is which. Okay, after that, you're going to tell me, and you'll see these instructions here too, saying it wants you to determine the main idea. I've got that down there too. When it's talking about redefining the analytical question in your own terms, that's this up here. How revolutionary was the revolution? So what are you looking for in this document? So if you're trying to answer this question, what are you looking in the document that's going to help you answer this question, is what that one's saying. For 5, and I'll go back to the sheet in just a second, organize documents into analytical categories. I think the 3 that would be helpful there are the ones that it mentions: politics, economics, and social groups. And when it says, subcategories, it's just saying that maybe not every single document will fit neatly into each category. So you might have to make, categories that combine the 2. But all in all, I think most things will fit, I think, pretty simply into those things. So here you're going to tell me what the document is dealing with. Is it dealing with social change? Is it dealing with political change? Is it dealing with economic change? Is it a combination of 2? And you can kind of explain yourself if you need to there. After that, the main idea. What is this document trying to tell you? Is what I want you to answer here. What are you supposed to be getting from this document? What's the main point that you take away here? And then finally, just list down here, is it radical or conservative? Remember, we're filling out this thing up here too. So like I said, first day, focus on getting this filled out. Just kind of skim over it, make sure you've looked at all the documents. Over the next couple of days after that, we'll look at each of these. But if you want to go ahead and get started on doing this stuff, it wouldn't be a bad idea at all to do that. So other than that, I think we're all ready to go. I think that's all you need for each one. Let me know if you have questions. And like I said, we'll meet over the next couple of days and talk about these individual documents.